Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction. Just got back from Scotiabank Arena here in Toronto, where the Lakers won 131-125 to get their first road win of the season and improve to 4-2. It was not the prettiest win. It started pretty impressively with LA getting out to a 26-point lead in the first half and it looking like they were about to easily win the game. And Bronny would get some second half reps and they'd be able to empty the bench. And it was just going to be a commanding lead. The starters would get to rest. And of course, we ended up seeing some of the third quarter shenanigans from last year's Lakers team in terms of effort and execution, and even some of the stuff we saw in that Cleveland game. And Toronto got back into the game into the second half. They cut it to as few as, I believe, 6 points was as close as they got, which also ended up being the final score. So LA was not happy with the way the second half went. They were not happy with how they closed the game, but they did end up, preserving the lead, getting the win. And that's what ultimately matters, but we will be getting into some of the things that went wrong. So I see you guys in the chat here, and I want to shout out Nathan Wiggins, who's able to catch one of these live. He just said, appreciate you. Appreciate Doggy, Albert, Dark Galaxy, Westwood, everyone commenting in the chat right now. So quickly, I want to touch on the box score, and then I'll get into my three takeaways. Things that stand out: AD, 38 points, 12 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. AD is now the leading scorer in the NBA, which is incredible. He's averaging 31.8 points per game, just past Nikola Jokic and Tyrese Maxey for the league leading scorer, and 14 for 20, 10 for 11 from the free throw line. Just remarkably efficient for AD. LeBronto had 27 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists, 9 of 17 shooting, 5 of 8 from deep. Rui struggled a bit, 9 points, 3 of 12 shooting was the only. Actually, he and Austin were the two starters with negative plus minuses. D'Lo had a bounce back game and one of his best performances of the season. And I'll be touching on him in an adjustment that JJ Redick made. 19 points, 6 assists for D'Lo, 20 and 6 for Austin. And he had a bit of a scare there for a second. It seemed like he sprained his ankle, but he ended up being fine and briefly exited late in the second quarter, was able to return for the second half. Then the bench, not much there with the bench, which is going to be one of my takeaways. Continues to be an issue. Max Christie did have 7 points in 13 minutes, was a team or a bench best +7. So I would say also had 5 rebounds, a couple of key offensive rebounds, including one in the fourth quarter. So Max, by I think the recent standards of his play, had a relatively solid game, I guess, in comparison. And yeah, and then Bronny interestingly played the final 7 seconds of the game, which I didn't really get. But and then Lakers shot 41 free throws, made 36 of them, 88%, and took care of the ball, 10 turnovers to 29 assists. So really good assist to turnover ratio there. But let's get into the 3 takeaways. Before we get started, as always, for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening in the morning on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. So my first takeaway for this one is a get-right game nearly gone wrong. And what I mean by that is this is the first time that the Lakers have played a bad team this season. If you look at, I just talked about it on my mailbag, which went up a little bit before game time. So I understand if you guys haven't checked it out yet, but please do so. If you have not, I tried to keep it, I knew it was coming out right before the game, so I tried to keep it evergreen questions that would still apply post-game. And I think pretty much all of them do. But this was supposed to be a get-right game for the Lakers, and it looked like that way. 43-19 lead after the first quarter. As I said, a 26-point lead in the first half. They were up by 25 at halftime, and this was shaping up to be their first wire-to-wire blowout of the season. And considering it was the first bad team that they played, it made sense. And the stars were aligning for the starters to rest by the end of third quarter, beginning of fourth, and get a much needed rest game, considering this is their fifth game in 8 days. But the second half started, and overall, LA was outscored 74-55 in the second half. At one point, it was 47-28, and it just like they got absolutely ran through in the second half, and ended up again having to have the starters play deep into the fourth quarter. I mean, they were basically out there closing outside of Bronny entering the last 7 seconds. So from that perspective, it was a bit disappointing and embarrassing given the opponent. Toronto is now 1-5. They're missing Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, Kelly Olynyk, and Bruce Brown Jr. So that's 4 of like their best 6 or 7 guys, and certainly at least like their best player and maybe like 3 of their top 4 players. So certainly, like, Toronto is already, when healthy, not a good team, but they were also missing several starters, several key guys. And for RJ Barrett had 33 and 12 assists. Grady Dick had 31. And they just lit the Lakers up in the second half. And if you look at a lot of the margin stuff, like Toronto had more fast break points than the Lakers. They had more second chance points than the Lakers. They had more points in the paint than the Lakers. And really, it was the free throw line where LA won this game by attempting 28 more free throws than the Raptors. Toronto's defense is some of the worst defense I've ever seen. Some of the worst defense I've certainly seen this season. It was Swiss cheese. LA was living in the paint in the first half, and then they made some smart adjustments and really packed the paint and challenged the Lakers to hit shots. And LA stopped running, multiple actions within each possession, and it just got stagnant. And the guys the bench was struggling, Rui was struggling, and it was just a really rough second half for the Lakers. So ultimately, you take the win if you're the Lakers, and they're 4-2 now. They won their first road game, first win of the road trip. They improved to 1-2 on the trip. They now have a game Monday in Detroit. They're going to be here in Toronto tomorrow. Tomorrow's an off day. Then they will practice Sunday here in Toronto, then fly to Detroit Sunday afternoon. So that's much needed rest day for this group, considering how much they've been traveling, how much they've been playing. Again, 5 games in 8 days, and I'm sure on some level that caught up to them in the second half. Really, the only guy who had an excuse for the second half was Austin Reeves, given he was playing on a bum ankle, though he did say post game he's feeling fine and he's going to play, even though it was swollen and whatnot. So Austin said he wants to play in all 82 games, and I find that admirable. He said he wants to pull LeBron, because LeBron just said that the other day. But I don't want to touch too much on it, because this to me it's almost like the equivalent of the Cleveland game, where from a basketball perspective, like there are certainly things that are concerning, but it was a tale of two halves, where like the first half was so dominant, so impressive. There was so much to be pleased by for the Lakers, and the second half was so bad. It kind of evens out, I guess. But one of my takeaways is going to be some of the concerns, and one of my second takeaway is going to be, I think, an interesting positive from this one. So let's just get into it. JJ Redick made a key rotation adjustment, one that he kind of was going to in the preseason, then he went away from, and now he's going back to it. And it's one I've talked about. If you listen to Buha's block or you listen to these post-game reactions, I talk about this quite a bit. So he ended up shifting some of the second unit lineups, where he paired D'Angelo Russell with Anthony Davis, and then he paired Austin Reeves with LeBron James. And those two pairings have just I've always made the most sense. And more recently, it had been D'Lo with LeBron and Austin with AD in those second units, and it worked. Austin and AD, like that two-man game has been very effective over the last few games, And D'Lo being out there, like they had that stretch against the Kings where they're really, really good and basically won the Lakers that game. But naturally, D'Lo and AD have really good pick and roll two-man chemistry. LeBron and Austin have always had really good two-man chemistry and are able to run inverted pick and rolls where where LeBron's the ball handler and Austin's screening for him, or vice versa. So I think this was always the pairings that made the most sense. I don't really know why JJ Redick went away from it. When I had talked about it and when I asked him about it, he just said Austin was injured in the preseason and kind of used that as a justification to going with the Austin AD pairing and the LeBron D'Lo pairing. But this makes more sense because D'Lo gets the ball in his hands more. And this is, if we're talking about D'Lo potentially coming off the bench at some point, I think it would make more sense to continue to stagger Austin and D'Lo as much as possible. And when D'Lo is on the floor without Austin, give him the ball and have him be the number 2 or number 3 guy, depending on if he's playing with LeBron or AD or both of them, and really empower and just unleash D'Lo more than he's been. Because when he's been on the floor with Austin, LeBron, and AD, he's largely been either a facilitator or just a catch and shoot, like off-ball guy in the corner, not really running the offense and playing like D'Lo. And it felt like tonight was last season's D'Lo more so than in previous games. And it's not just because he hit shots. It was more so the flow, the rhythm that he was in offensively. And I felt like he had a really solid game. So I think this is the way to go moving forward is have Austin. So it ended up being Austin, Dalton, Rui, LeBron, and Jackson. And I really like that unit. And then briefly there was the unit with D'Lo, Gabe, Max, AD, and Rui. And it feels like anytime I look at the Gabe, Rui's on the floor, and he only played 33 minutes tonight, but it feels like every time I'm looking at some type of lineup, Rui's like the one guy that's always in there no matter what, because he's just playing such a pivotal role right now. But I think that was a smart adjustment from JJ. Austin Reeves said post-game that JJ came to him and D'Lo this morning and talked about it and talked about his reasoning, and both guys were on board with it. So I think moving forward, we're probably going to see Austin more with LeBron in certain bench lineups, and then D'Lo more with AD, and the ball being in D'Lo's hands a bit more, and that trying to unlock him. And I wonder if this ultimately shifts toward Gabe or Dalton or whoever. Dalton actually, well, he was leading the bench in minutes until Gabe closed and surpassed him, but until like the midway point of the fourth, Dalton had the lead in terms of minutes played. So Dalton is playing a bit more. Max was 9th on the team in minutes. I think this shift made some more sense. Like Max was more efficient in a bit of a smaller role, and Gabe and Dalton were the 2 bench leaders. So Gabe continues to struggle, and I will touch on that in my next one. But I think that this rotation adjustment by JJ was a smart one, was one I'm surprised he even had to make, because I feel like this is what he did in the preseason, and just looking at the 2 pairings, AD and D'Lo, and then Austin and LeBron have always, in my opinion, made the most sense. But we're here now, and that's what's important for the Lakers. And then third takeaway is the same trends or the same flaws and weaknesses and concerns with this team continue to persist. So again, as I said, they're outscored in transition by this Toronto group. They gave up 15 offensive rebounds, which led to 20 Toronto second chance points. Toronto was able to score 15 points off of the Lakers turnovers. I believe I'm reading the box score right. And they outscored the Lakers in the paint after LA had a major advantage in the paint through the first half. So it was like the Lakers defense has really been concerning, I would say, through the first 6 games, particularly in transition, but also just on the perimeter. Like their guards are really struggling to keep guys in front of them, to switch off ball, to chase screens, to screen navigation, all that stuff. And perimeter scorers are having their way with the Lakers right now, and it's keeping these teams. Like, it's one thing if it's a Sacramento, if it's a Phoenix, if it's a Cleveland. Those are all good teams that project to be in the playoffs, and some of those teams are going to win 50 plus games. But a team like Toronto, who again is already bad, it's a lottery team. It's a team that's going for Cooper Flag. They're missing multiple starters and key players, and for them to not like even if they made like just one run, it would have been one thing. But they made multiple runs there in the second half, and LA was just not really able to put them away. They were able to keep the distance at around 6, but I don't know. And Rui hit a couple of big threes to make it to 12, but Toronto made another run there. And I just think that the Lakers, the defense, the bench, Gabe, as I mentioned, 1 for 6 tonight. I still think is playing solid defense overall, but has just been a non-factor and really a minus offensively. Just seems out of place and is sometimes forcing looks to try and get a rhythm. Just hasn't been able to do it. Max, I think, took a little bit of just one for one, but I think took a step back in terms of like looking for his shot. I think he kind of, because of the struggles, I think was a bit more selective tonight, which is probably a good thing, but also you want there to be a certain level of aggression. Dalton was just 2 of 5 and Jackson was 1 of 1. So like the bench just continues to really struggle in terms of offensive production, and the Lakers don't need these guys dropping double figures necessarily. But when your bench is just a non-factor offensively to this degree, I think it really complicates your lineup construction. It causes you to really lean on the starters. And it's fine if your starters are healthy, but we've already seen AD deal with the hip injury. Austin sprained his ankle tonight. D'Lo has been dealing with a lower back issue. Rui had the calf issue entering the season. And LeBron is 39, about to be 40. So like all these guys are already a little bit banged up to some extent. LeBron is played more minutes and has more mileage than any player in NBA history. So the Lakers, I just think, got to be careful with how much they've had to rely on their starters. And that's why, going back to takeaway 1, like it would have been nice for them to just put this game away, go into the fourth quarter up 20 plus, and be able to rest these guys, because they basically have had now 6 close games, or 5 because they got blown out in Cleveland. But those 5 close games, like all the starters have played basically 30 plus minutes, and in some cases, close to 40 minutes. And it's fine 6 games in, but you add that up to 15 games in, 25 games in, 35 games in. And I think the Lakers have so far up to this point in the season been a very top-heavy team. I think more top-heavy than they anticipated, more top-heavy than I anticipated. And if any of those starters go down, or even if they move D'Lo to the bench and insert Gabe, and like I think reducing any of these guys' minutes is going to come at a cost to the team. And D'Lo's been the most up and down, obviously, of the starters so far. Rui and Austin are posting career best numbers right now, and D'Lo has kind of been the 5th guy there. But D'Lo bounced back tonight, and I thought I had a good game. I think if JJ is serious about sticking with this, we're probably going to see some better play from D'Lo. But the bench has been concerning, and the perimeter defense, the transition defense, they continue to be concerning. So moving forward, like bigger picture, that's just my thing with the Lakers right now is teams are turning these games into track meets, and the Lakers don't have the athletes or the speed to keep up with most teams. Like they're on the slower end of teams in the league. And it's kind of weird to say that for a team that has LeBron and AD, but that's just like the reality. There aren't a lot of quick twitch, super athletic players on this team. And one of the guys is Jared Vanderbilt. And that might've been its own takeaway, actually. Was I buried the lead here. Like Jared Vanderbilt, yesterday was the 2-week mark from when the Lakers were supposed to give us an update. And we asked JJ Redick pregame, and he said that he's progressing well. He is in Vando, but he is still dealing with some pain or some discomfort. That's the word he used. He said that's normal coming back from double foot surgery, that starting to get back onto the court, you're going to go through that. But he said it's going to be another week or so before they have another update for Vando. So that sounds like Vando's out. I mean, a week minimum, probably you would think another week from there, or maybe he ramps up from there and it's like a few days, but it's looking like Vando's out at least another 10 days or so. And based on the way these updates have been coming out, it seems like it's probably closer to like 2+ weeks. So that's a bit of a setback for the Lakers in terms of getting Vando back. And that's like one of the few guys that is an elite perimeter defender, is athletic and long, can switch, defend multiple positions, is an energy guy, is a hustle guy, good rebounder. So not having him, no Christian Wood update. It sounds like he's going to miss at least another week before he's reevaluated when they come back from this trip in about like 5 days. So maybe there'll be another update on him when we get back to LA. But like them missing like those two guys is hurt because those guys are long. Christian is statistically actually a pretty good rim protector, which doesn't necessarily match the eye test, but the Lakers have defended well with him on the floor, and his rim protection numbers have been good. So I think getting those two guys will eventually help. But in the meantime, they're really struggling defending good scorers on the perimeter. And with Detroit, Cade Cunningham is really starting to break out this year and started to break out last year really. And then John Morant in Memphis, like Desmond Bane's out, Marcus Smart's out, so they are down some guys now, but that's still going to be a tough matchup. They just blew out the Milwaukee Bucks at home. The Bucks aren't playing well, but still, it's going to be a tough one. So the Lakers doesn't get much easier. Then they go back home. They play Philly. That's going to be a tough one. And with the Lakers' luck, the Philly will have Embiid and Paul George back by that point. Those guys will be clicking with Maxey. So like that's been the Lakers' luck in terms of like guys coming back against them. But again, to recap, like my biggest takeaway was like this was a get right game that the Lakers did not get right in and had a lot go wrong in the second half and ultimately weren't able to rest guys. My second thing is JJ made a smart adjustment with swapping Austin and D'Lo and the lineups that those two are playing in. I think it really helps D'Lo. And then number three, the defense and the bench continue to be issues, and they're probably going to be issues for at least a couple more weeks until Vando and Christian Wood get back. If they get back in a couple more weeks, who knows at this point. So with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. I see we do have a super chat, so I will start with that. Shout out to Diego Cardona. Thank you for the super chat. Notice JJ went back to the pairings of D'Lo with AD and LeBron with Austin. What, in your opinion, makes those pairings work better versus the other way around, D'Lo with LeBron, Austin with AD? So I didn't really touch on the opposite end of it. So I did obviously touch on what I like about those pairings together. But in comparison to the other ones, I think when D'Lo's with LeBron, it's just basically having 2 point guards out there. So I think you're cutting some of that usage with D'Lo, and D'Lo's a very rhythm-based player, in my opinion. And I think if you just watch him for his time with the Lakers, like I think he's played at his best. Like last season, a big part of the reason why he was so successful was, remember, LeBron goes out and he gets empowered in that game in Utah. And then from that point on, he clearly becomes the Lakers' number 3 option and even number 2 option if AD or LeBron misses a game here or there, or just even on some nights he's feeling it and he's the number 2 guy. And you saw like the games, LeBron misses that Milwaukee game and then D'Lo helps them win it, goes for, I think he had like 44 or something that game. So D'Lo, like when D'Lo is empowered as the primary ball handler, point guard, whatever you want to deem it, he's performed pretty well. I think that the problem is LeBron is just better at it than him. And I think overall, Austin has been a better player, and the Lakers have been really invested in Austin in trying to maximize his game and figure out the way to optimize him. So D'Lo's just fallen down in the pecking order, and I think it's resulted in him often just playing off the ball and not really being in rhythm. And you're seeing him like a lot of times he's catching grenades out there where it's swing, end of the shot clock. He's trying to beat it. 3-4 seconds left and just kind of flinging something up there. And those have been a lot of the shots and possessions where D'Lo's been involved in the offense compared to previous seasons. And he still has facilitated well. So that's the one thing I'll give him credit for is I think he's still been a really good facilitator and playmaker. But in terms of his own offense and what made him so difficult to defend last season, and we still haven't really seen that guy at least consistently to start this year. And again, he's taken a back seat to Rui and Austin, who have taken more shots than him, both have higher usage percentages than him, are both averaging more points than him. And again, D'Lo's gone from being the 3rd guy in that starting lineup to more so being the fifth guy. And I think it's really affected him. And he's a very rhythm-based player. So if he's going multiple games without really getting into a rhythm, I think it kind of compounds things. With Austin, I really think Austin can play with either player, because a lot of Austin's game with both guys is just a lot of pick and roll. And we saw it in, especially, like, he started showing it as a rookie, but especially that second year as the Lakers made the Western Conference Finals, he and LeBron had really good two-man chemistry in terms of empty side pick and rolls. So that's like on the left or right side, no one's in the corner. The three guys are on the other side of the floor, and just those two running a two-man game with either guy being capable of being the ball handler. So I would say, I think, like, really, I would almost say, like, this season, because of how dominant AD has been, it's really been like whoever's with AD looks better. Because Austin and AD, remember, like the Phoenix game, they helped close that out with their two-man game, and actually both Phoenix games that the second one they lost, but they were kept in it because of the Austin AD pick and roll, and both guys played really well. So I think Austin's kind of, in my opinion, a little bit more flexible and versatile in terms of his fit with both guys. But I think he and LeBron are so smart, and that's something that JJ pointed out. He was like, those two are just so smart that they just figure it out. They just have this, telepathic connection, or telekinetic, whatever, connection, that, like, they just are two smart guys who figure it out, and they have a versatile, malleable, essence to their games. Whereas I think D'Lo and AD, like, they'll still run a lot of pick and roll, but I think it's just D'Lo bringing the ball up, getting to call the offense, AD either screening for him or functioning around the elbows. Even if it's just D'Lo kind of setting AD up, I think that gets him in a rhythm, just touching the ball and feeling more involved in the offense. So that would be my assessment of why those pairings make a bit more sense. When you play D'Lo with AD, D'Lo gets to be more the point guard, more the ball handler, more the creator. Austin and LeBron, both guys can function off the ball, I think, a little easier than D'Lo can. So it either way, if one of them is getting the ball a little bit more, I don't think the other one is as compromised or like ineffective as taking the ball out of D'Lo's hands. Okay, let's go to the next question. Jonathan Rubio, serious question. Why is it that someone's always having a career night against us? I think people just love playing against the Lakers. I do like, I even notice it with the media where, so I used to cover the Clippers, and you'd go in the locker room, and depending on, like, the first year I covered them, it was before Kawhi, before PG, and it was like, no one was in that locker room, on the road, right? It was just the people who cover the team would be in the locker room. And obviously once they got Kawhi and PG, there would be a little bit more people. But you go on the road with LeBron and the Lakers, and just tonight, it was like 20 plus people waiting in the locker room, mainly Toronto people, waiting to talk to LeBron, film LeBron, just kind of be around LeBron, right? So LeBron's almost like a universe, like unto himself. But you add in the Lakers brand and the global nature of their fan base, and I see it in the comments, right? We got people from China, Philippines, people from Europe, people from all over the place, and like that's the power of the Lakers brand. And so I would say, I guess to bring it back to the like opposing players, like I think sometimes last year was kind of used as an excuse, like Darvin would often reference it, but other guys would reference it in the locker room, that like another player got up for this matchup, and like we're almost playing, we're getting everyone's best on a nightly basis. And I do think that's a true thing of like, people know if they show out against LeBron, against the Lakers, that's going to be on SportsCenter, that's going to be on House of Highlights, that's going to get traction on social media. And it also, like, the opposite way, right? Like if the Lakers do well, or that's going to get attention, and then those people are within that. So you just kind of know, like, Lakers also play a lot of national TV games, so that's also part of it, where national TV games, everyone tries to get up for that. So I think that's a big reason. And then I guess the final thing would just be the Lakers defense has not been good. So or at least to start this year. So that's I think a big reason why guys are just having career nights. I'm seeing some things in the chat I cannot repeat. Okay. Let's see. Ryan Rich, do you think Dalton should look to score more since the bench scoring is struggling? I'm seeing fireworks outside. I'm not sure why. But sorry, Ryan, do you think Dalton should look to score more since the bench scoring is struggling? Yes, I think I would like to see Dalton on ball a little bit more. I think he's primarily been used off the ball, and teams I've actually, I think, scouted for Dalton and are treating him like a 5-year veteran sniper and are locking into him off the ball. And I think one thing for him that he needs to improve on is creating space, and also the Lakers using more plays and more wrinkles to get him open. But I also think part of it's like some of the lineups he's played in. Like, really, if it's, I mean, just any. I don't think the Lakers should play more than like 2 bench guys at a time, and that's kind of hard to do. But it's just really been like when you have 3 of these guys on the floor together, and maybe Dalton's the exception there, where like if you're going with, I guess it shouldn't be Max, Gabe, and Jackson. I'd like to avoid that trio. I'd really like to avoid Max and Gabe together. But with Dalton, I just think there's so many mouths to feed on this team that he hasn't really found his footing yet. He's also a rookie. It's also a few games in. So I think he's still figuring out how to create space, how to get open, and what his role is going to be on this team. Because we've seen flashes of it. He hit that big 3 against the Kings in that like late third quarter. Had obviously a great garbage time against the Cavs, but that was garbage time. So like it shows a certain skill set, because going back to last season, JHS, Maxwell Lewis, those guys did not perform well in garbage time. So at least you see with Dalton, like he's overqualified. He's too good to be playing in those minutes against those like second and third and fourth string guys. Like he's having his way when he plays in garbage time. But I do think he could be more aggressive, and I also think the Lakers could be more aggressive and more intentional. That's a big word that JJ has used in terms of creating opportunities for Dalton to get involved. Adam Hurley, where's JHS? Just curious. So I didn't mention the JHS update. So I asked JJ Redick what went into the decision to not or to decline the 3rd-year option on JHS. I was like, I know this is a Rob question, but you both have said you interact on these things, you talk through these things. So like, what was your opinion, or just what went into that decision? And he said that the Lakers did that move for financial flexibility for next summer, but that they have not given up on JHS. He's like, I've not given up on him, and I still believe in him, but they want him to develop in South Bay and then into next summer. I would assume with the Lakers Summer League team, and then reassess the situation. So I think they had a deadline, and they had to make a decision on like, is this guy worth giving a 3rd year to? And based on what they had seen up to this point, the answer was no. And they're not going to say that, but that's like reading between the lines of what JJ was saying. And it was like, we're going to give him this season in South Bay, and next summer league if he wants to be on our summer league team, and then if he performs well, like we'll keep him around, we'll re-sign him. If not, then he's a free agent and he can move on, and we can use that money, elsewhere, that roster spot elsewhere. So that was interesting. As for where JHS is right now, he's with the South Bay going through training camp. So he's not with the team currently. Otherwise, I think we probably would have requested to speak with him and just ask him about the situation. So JHS was not there. So we were not able to observe his interactions with the locker room, or like what today was like for him. Cause I'm sure it would have been awkward on some level, but yeah, that's the latest on JHS. super chat from Kane Carter. What's up, Kane? Thoughts on a move for AO/Capella? What's Vando's value? I like AO. I think I answered a question about him a couple of post-game reactions ago where I said to me he's more of like in that like middle range of options in terms of guys that I think the Lakers could get for like that kind of backcourt / small wing spot that I think they could use an improvement on. So I like him. Capella, I had ranked number 1 on. I've did a mailbag on this. I've talked about this on here, where I went through and I looked at every roster and assessed like which big men could potentially be available, which big men would make sense for the Lakers, and which big men would the Lakers potentially be interested in. And it was in more art than science, but I put it all together. I came up with 9 names, and I had Clint Capella as the number 1 name on that list. Actually, I guess I technically had Walker Kessler number 1. Clint Capella was number 2, but I think Clint Capella, like last year, was a 13th in the league in terms of field goal percentage allowed at the rim. So has sneakily been a really good rim protector, has constantly been like a 1.5 plus blocks per game guy. Actually, one of the best offensive rebounders, has led the league in offensive rebound percentage twice in the past 4 years. So he's regressed in terms of his finishing and his being like a vertical lob threat, but he can still do some of that. And I think as a guy who could either start, but I think at this point when we talk about guys starting, we have to factor in like Rui is playing at a really, really high level. And I know he had a down game tonight, but like on the aggregate, Rui is averaging career highs in points, rebounds, 3-point percentage, and I think defensively has been above average. And this is like the best stretch and like most consistent I've seen Rui be defensively. So when we talk about, let's bring in another center for this group, and that guy will start next to AD. It's like, is that guy better than Rui? Because in my opinion, Clint Capella is not better than Rui, and I don't think if they brought in Clint Capella that he should start over Rui. So I think that's some like, I think Rui has changed the conversation a bit, and we'll see if he keeps it up. And again, I keep saying this, I don't expect the Lakers to make a move until at least like early January. I think it's going to be a couple months here before they do something. But if Rui keeps this up or 85-90% of this, I think he deserves to continue to start, in part because of the continuity and the reps that he has with LeBron and AD. And then it becomes a conversation of, okay, can we bring in a center to replace Jackson, to replace Christian? And that guy can still play 20, maybe even 24, 25 minutes a night off the bench, but and play next to AD some, but it's going to have to be in a bench context because Rui has earned that starting spot. So that's like the one thing, but I do like AO. I do like Clint Capella. Vando's value, what I've talked about this before, and I think Vando has more value to the Lakers, and I think he has a higher perception with the fan base than he does league wide in talking to people. Like a lot of people, and sometimes you see, like I think with the Lakers, sometimes there's a lot of like misinformation in terms of like a lot of people were really low on them, and I was on here saying this is a team that could easily be a 5 or 6 seed, should make the playoffs, can be a threat to win a round, and maybe depending on the matchups win another round. But like this team is better than people are putting them 9th, 10th, 11th in the West, and I just think that's crazy. I think they're better than that. But with Vando, I think it's kind of a similar thing where people really just focus on the offense and the offensive limitations. And it's like, yeah, this guy's a good defender, but he's going to be played off the floor. And I think it's a legitimate concern until we see it, because the last time we saw Vando, he was progressively played off the floor in all 3 series on the Lakers Western Conference Finals run. If you look at it, game over game, like from game 1 to game 6 in the first 2 series, game 1 to game 4 in the Western Conference Finals, Vando's minutes decreased in part because of the way that defenses were guarding him and the way it was messing up the Lakers spacing. So that is something that the Lakers are going to have to figure out. I do think that they showed some progress last year. Obviously, the 2 weeks before Vando got injured, he had multiple games with double-digit points, and it felt like they had finally unlocked him. He was about to start, and then he got injured, and then that's it. We haven't seen him since. So I think Vando's trade value is probably not very high right now. I would probably view it as like a neutral. I've talked about this before, like a neutral to like slightly negative trade value. So I don't think Vando alone is like netting the Lakers a difference maker. I think they would have to attach a first round pick, and he could be aggregated with Gabe or D'Lo or JHS, and they could mix and match multiple of those guys to get a better player or a couple of players. But right now, I don't think Vando, especially coming off this, like he hasn't played since February now. We're in November. It's been almost 9 months. It's actually been over 9 months because he got injured on February 1st. So it's been over 9 months since Jared Vanderbilt has played an NBA basketball game. And for a guy with his, like, he's had foot issues before, he's dealt with injuries before in the league. So I think you factor in the injuries and the offensive limitations, and I don't think he has a lot of trade value, to be honest. Now, his contract isn't like crazy. So that's like the one thing, is that if he does have a good couple week stretch or month stretch, I think he can rehab that perception and his value. But as of right now, based on a lot of people remember more so the 2023 playoffs than what he did right before he got injured. And because of that, I don't think he has a lot of value, to be honest. Though, again, his contract is so team friendly and reasonable that I don't think it's like this anchor on your cap sheet. But I do think he's going to have to come back and play well for a little bit to kind of become a better asset for the Lakers to potentially move. Another super chat here. King Carter again, thank you. Reeves, Dante, or Hero? Worst to best, what's your take? This is a good one. Reeves, Dante, or Hero? I would rank them. I think I'd put Dante last, and then, and it's tough because I really like Dante. I think Dante's underrated, but I would probably put Dante last, and then Reeves versus Hero. That's tough. Like, it kind of depends, like what, like if we're talking offense, I would go Hero, Reeves, Dante. When we're factoring in defense and like the little things, I think arguably that makes up the gap between Reeves and Hero. I think they're pretty close. I'd probably lean Hero, Reeves, Dante, but I wouldn't fault anyone who had Reeves first. I'd probably have to dig into their numbers this year because I have an idea, but I'm not following the other teams as closely as the Lakers, obviously. But I think Austin's been awesome. Like he's averaging or was averaging 6 rebounds a game. I mentioned held De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, and Anthony Edwards to 9 of 25 shooting across the first 4 games. Career high in points, career high 3-point percentage, shooting 52%. Like Austin's been awesome as the number 3 guy. And Hero is much more of a defensive liability, and I think can sometimes play a little bit like me first basketball, which I'm personally not a big fan of, but also I think he's not good enough to really do that. So I'm kind of talking myself into Austin here. I think it's really, really close. I would probably lean Hero, but I think it's close. Let me know in the chat what you guys think about how would you guys rank these 3. I see let's see. Trey has Reeves, Hero, Dante. Andrew has Hero, Dante, Reeves. King Carter has Dante, Reeves, Hero. Nathan Wiggins has Reeves, Hero, Dante. Reeves better than Hero and Dante. I mean, so it's, I hear, like, you can make a case. So what I'll say is, like, you can make it, like, again, it's kind of hard to say because it's like, what does the rest of the roster look like? Like, what does the lineup look like? Because as some are saying in the chat, like, I think Dante, with his defense, with his rebounding, with his toughness and tenacity, like, he's probably an easier fit into a lot of teams. Like, you can plug and play Dante DiVincenzo into almost any lineup, and he's a really, really good shooter. He's probably the best shooter of these 3, at least as like a catch and shoot guy. Like, he can get really hot and drain a bunch of threes. I think Hero and Austin are much more dynamic though as ball handlers, as playmakers. I think Austin's the best passer of these three. Like if we're passing out, I would go Austin, Tyler, Dante. Like defense, I would go Dante, Austin, Tyler. Scoring, I would go Tyler, Austin, Dante. Rebounding, I would go Dante, Austin, Tyler. So like there's so many different ways to kind of rank these guys. I think it's a really interesting question, but I mean, maybe I'm overrating Hero's offensive bag. Like I think and he does it relatively efficiently. So it's like, I think a guy who can get you 20 points consistently on like not terrible efficiency is a valuable skill. It's one of the hardest skills to find in the league. Cause like anyone can get you 20, but it's a matter of like, how are they getting you the 20 and are they having to take a million shots? And I don't really view Hero as that guy, but maybe I'm like Dante, as Sky Falcon's saying, like Dante doesn't have the shot selection or shot creation that you want from a guard. Like Dante to me is like a 6th or 7th man, but like a really, really elite 6th or 7th man, or like 5th starter, I guess. I think Austin and Tyler are a little bit, I just think like they can score easier and are more dynamic offensive players. And it really just kind of depends. Like if Dante was a little bit, because that's the other thing, Dante's like 6'3", 6'4". He's the shortest of them. Like maybe Hero's kind of right there with him, but I don't know. It's a good question. I disagree on the Reeves defense. Like there are some matchups where Austin, like Donovan Mitchell cooked him. I will like there's no other way to spin that. Donovan Mitchell had his way with Austin, but De'Aaron Fox, he defended Devin Booker really, really well. And if you don't believe me, go to NBA.com stats and look at the matchups. Like I'm like and the tracking isn't perfect, but enough with this though. Let's move on to another one. Now we're arguing about Austin. Okay, see, there's another super chat from Gray Raj. Gabe for Larry Nance Jr. in Atlanta. They need guards. I would do that if I were the Lakers. The one concern I would have, and I mentioned this on the mailbag today, is LA's really only playing 4 guards right now. I guess if you consider Dalton a guard, I don't. I consider Dalton more of a small forward, but it's 2 and 3 are relatively interchangeable. But if let's just say for argument's sake, they're playing 4 guards right now: D'Lo, Austin, Gabe, and Max. The rest of their guards are Cam, JHS, and Bronny, 3 guys that I do not want to rely on if I'm the Lakers. So if you trade Gabe, all of a sudden you have 3 guards. And I know Gabe has I see the comments, I see the tweets. I know the fan base is upset with Gabe. He's not playing well offensively, and even his defense is. I think he's had some solid to good stretches, but he hasn't been as impactful as his salary. Let's just say that, right? So, but the coaching staff clearly trusts him. He closed tonight. He's closed now. I want to say the Cleveland game doesn't count, obviously, because it was a blowout, but he's now closed 4 of the 5 games. So the coaching staff really likes Gabe and they really trust him. And he's not playing like an egregious amount of minutes, like played just under 21 minutes tonight, which is probably on the high end for him, but it's not like this isn't a Torian situation where he's playing 30 minutes, 35 minutes at the expense of better players. And like the Lakers are kind of out of options. Like I don't, if you look at this bench, I don't know really who's supposed to be playing more. You can make the case like the starters could be playing more, but as I was saying earlier, I think you got to be careful with wearing the starters out with like all these guys are relatively high usage. You're relying on them to score every single night. They're all playing low to mid, if not high 30s. And I think you just got to be careful. It's game 6, and all these guys are relatively banged up already. So I think Gabe's in a good place, like minutes wise. But if you take Gabe out, like Larry Nance Jr., I think is a better player. So I think it's a win, and I would do this. I think then the Lakers probably need to make a separate move though to add another guard, because even if you slot, let's just say you now Dalton's the 4th guard, you still like it's a big ball handling gap as of right now, in my opinion, even going from Gabe to Dalton. And I know Gabe has not been Miami Gabe. He's not been a great ball handler, but he can at least bring the ball up the floor against pressure and like run the offense, like get it going. Maybe Dalton could do that. We haven't seen that from him. I think that the team wants him more as a finisher than an initiator. I think they can test him out more as an initiator, but I do think you lose some ball handling and some shot creation or just kind of running the offense if you take Gabe out. And I think if they make this trade, I think then it's like, can we flip JHS and a second or something for some backup guard that can kind of replace Gabe in the rotation? That would be my move as the next thing. But in like a vacuum, yes, this is Gabe for Larry. I would do that because Larry's a better player. And I think Larry would fit great with LeBron and AD. He could play next to Rui. He could play small ball 5. He could play the 4. And he's versatile. He's a good passer. Can defend multiple positions. So I think he'd be good. Dark Galaxy. Why does JJ love Gabe so much? So I would say he loves Gabe so much because Gabe does a lot of the little things, right? So he's very professional, and that stuff matters to coaches. Like coaches in the chaos of coaching and not like, I mean, you think about JJ, like JJ's a control freak. He wants to be as involved in controlling everything as much as he reasonably can. And to have zero, I mean, you could call plays, right? And call time. Like coaches have some control over what happens on the floor, but they ultimately, like, they're not passing the ball. They're not shooting the ball. They're not setting the screens. They're not defending. It's all on the players. So to have a guy like Gabe who's reliable, and JJ said, I would love to have 9, 10, 12 Gabe Vincents on my team any day. And I think it's because Gabe is a lunch pail guy. He's a guy who shows up early, stays late, does the work, listens to the game plan, tries to execute it to the best of his ability. Obviously, he has struggled making shots. I think he struggled a bit with offensive decision-making, and defensively, I think he really tries, but he just sometimes is at a size disadvantage that it's just no matter how hard you try or how good you are defensively, if you're switched, especially with LA switching so much, if he switched onto a bigger guard, that guy's probably going to score over him. So I think like we saw it in the finals against Denver. Jamal Murray really gave Gabe Vincent a lot of problems, and that was a point guard, but he's a big point guard. So I think Gabe is just like, you ideally want him guarding a like-sized player and not really switching onto the bigger wings. But, and we saw it with Kevin Durant, like he was able to pick on him. Devin Booker was able to pick on him. So bigger guards and wings have been able to pick on him. And that's like the one thing. But I think it comes back to, especially if we're looking at the Lakers have often closed. This is the first time I think that Gabe closed alongside D'Lo. Otherwise, he's often been replacing D'Lo. And if you look at it, it's really a defensive substitution. They're going with LeBron, AD, Rui, and Austin. Right now, they're top 4 options offensively. And I think in Austin and Rui's case, 2 guys who have improved defensively and have been like average to above average on that end. And then it's been like, we don't trust D'Lo defensively, essentially. Let's go with Gabe. And the alternative is Max. And Max, I would say, has played worse than Gabe. So it's also kind of an options thing where JJ, like, who else is he turning to, right? Like he's not turning to Dalton for defense, and he's not turning to D'Lo for defense. And Gabe has probably outplayed Max. I think it's been close, but probably outplayed him overall. So I think that's also part of it. Is just if JJ wants to close with better two-way balance and doesn't want a perimeter liability, at least defensively, he's going to go with Gabe. And I think in the Phoenix game, he probably should have gone with Max just because they were picking on Gabe and D'Lo so much in switches and pick and rolls. But I mean, so far it's been Gabe's been his guy, and I don't think it's reached Torrey levels, but it is something to, you know, I think at some point the Lakers, like, this is a position they could upgrade. The problem is they also need a backup center. I think they need another wing. I think they need a better defensive guard, like 2 guard next to Austin. So the list of things they need is long, and a better backup point guard is probably like 4th on that list, in my opinion. Adrian Damla, talk about why Reddish isn't getting any minutes. So I talked about this on my mailbag today. I think it just comes down to the offensive limitations with Reddish. He is a below average shooter. We know that JJ really values shooting with his perimeter players. All of these guys, at least with the exception of Gabe, I guess, have shot the ball. Like Dalton came in as a shooter. Austin and D'Lo are both good shooters. Max had been a good shooter his first 2 years, but has not shot the ball well this year. And then Gabe has been a streaky shooter, but again, he's their best, technically like point guard defender. It's between him and D'Lo, and he's much better defender than D'Lo. So I think Cam has gotten squeezed a bit just by like virtue of JJ going with a 9-man rotation. But I also think Cam Reddish kind of exists more in theory than he does in reality. And if you go back and actually look at like how many productive games he had last season, I think it was fewer than people remember. Like they did win during that stretch with him starting, but like his actual contributions in terms of locking a guy down or like hitting multiple threes. Yeah, the Phoenix game, he certainly had a few games in early November, but I think people remember it being a longer stretch than it actually was. And then you go to, he did not have a good preseason. Remember that game in Golden State, they lose by almost 60. Cam starting, he goes 1 for 11. I think that was an opportunity for him to show that he can make better decisions and was a better shooter and finisher offensively. And he really struggled in that game. Then even in the Cleveland game, gets his first shift of the season and gets downhill, misses a point blank layup. So I think really it's more so the offensive end than anything. And the team, the team showed the player it values. They gave Max Christie a 4-year, $32 million deal. Cam Reddish is on a minimum contract. Probably wouldn't even be a Laker if you didn't have that player option. So I think that there's a pretty big gap there in terms of how the Lakers view a guy like, because I think Max would be the one guy, right? If we're saying like who's Cam going to replace, it's probably Max, but the Lakers are much higher on Max than they are on Cam. That's just, it is what it is, whether you agree or not. I personally think Max is a better player. I think Max is playing closer to his floor right now than anything. And I still think like he's giving you more. Like Cam Reddish is not getting 5 rebounds in a game. Like Cam Reddish is not a good rebounder. Now Max again has not played well offensively, but I get it. Like Cam has a lot of fans. He was a high school prodigy. He went to Duke. He was a lottery pick, and a lot of people are fond of Cam. But again, at least if you look at his Lakers tenure, outside of that like 1 to 2 weeks to start November, and during that stretch, or I think he entered November 9th, and then he was starting into December. Like he had some good games for sure, but it was not as many as I think people act like it was. Like he had this 2-month stretch, and it was not that long. So that's my one thing with Cam. But I'm also just kind of relaying like what I've heard and what they clearly have telegraphed with their moves of like Cam to them is a vet minimum guy. Max is a guy that is worth investing in and they want for multiple years. So I don't really see who he's got to take the minutes of either Dalton or Max. And I don't think currently he's a better player than either one of them, but that's also what the coaching staff thinks. So like, if you take my opinion out of it, that's also what they think. And that's why he's not playing. Also, he missed 2 games with personal reasons, so I don't know what was behind that, but that also set him kind of behind in terms of, like, he wasn't even available the first 2 games, but yeah. D8, we need Jovan to plant the seed, give Oliveri a shot with the main team. Look, I said in the preseason that Quincy Oliveri should have gotten a shot after that Milwaukee game. He should have got a shot with the real rotation, even if it was similar to like a Bronny stint. Give him 3 to 4 minutes and just see what that looks like. I felt he deserved it just for single-handedly basically winning the Lakers that game. He never got it. Looked good in the Golden State game, but none of the regulars really played in that one. I think at this point he'll probably play at some point, but I don't think he's likely to get like actual rotation minutes, at least not for a while. They want him right now with South Bay and growing with that program. So, but Quincy, to me, I think like the 2 preseason games, he looked better than all the guys at the back of the bench, and I think he probably deserves a shot. The chat is funny. You guys are hilarious. All right, I'm trying to catch up. Just chill. Jovan, can you post comments? It would help us visual learners. Thanks. Love your work. Well, thank you for the super chat. What do you mean by post comments? Like, I'm trying to post unless I'm not understanding what you mean by that. Another one here from George Santiago. What should AR-DLo, Rui if LeBron and AD decide to chill on intensity like that second half? That's where they almost lost it. Thanks to work. Are you asking what AR? Well, thank you for the super chat. Are you asking what AR-DLo and Rui should do? I think those guys can give a better effort. Like Rui just didn't have it tonight offensively. I think Austin and D'Lo both. I mean, Austin had 20 and 6. D'Lo had 19 and 6. I thought both guys had solid offensive games. Austin was a bit inefficient, 4 for 13 from the floor, 0 for 6 on threes, but he got to the free throw line 14 times. So I thought he did a really good job with getting around that elbow free throw line area, drawing fouls with his head fakes and getting to the rim a bit. I said D'Lo, I felt like had one of his best performances of the season. And so I don't like defensively, those guys could all be better, but I think that the Lakers starting lineup is not a good defensive lineup. Like that's the other thing here is that you have Rui and Austin are kind of the wing stoppers. And I think that's a problem. Like I think both those guys have held up better than expected in certain matchups and have defended well in certain matchups, but you probably want Austin more as like the second guard that you are putting on perimeter guys, and you want Rui more as like the second forward. But AD has to put out all these fires defensively. He has to be all over the place. And then LeBron is often being hidden on like the weakest link in the front court. And then D'Lo is being hidden on the kind of non-scorer in the backcourt. So it's like you kind of have a couple guys you're trying to hide, and then you're putting guys in stopper roles that aren't really stoppers. And that's why that lineup largely gets by outscoring people. And they're really good at it. They have all 5 guys can drop 15 to 20 on any given night. And AD's leading the league in scoring. So like AD and LeBron are going to carry it. But if you're talking about like the intensity, I think those guys can pick up the intensity. I do think it stems a lot, oftentimes to your leaders. And LeBron and AD, for as great as both guys are, and I have AD right now as a top 5 guy in the league. I think LeBron has not been a top 10 guy, but he's probably still top 12 to 15. But if there's like one criticism, it's like sometimes they can coast at times. And I think it's understandable. AD's carrying a massive workload on both sides of the ball. He's the entire Lakers defense essentially, and he's leading the league in scoring offensively. He's massively increased his usage. LeBron is 40, about to be 40, year 22, more mileage and minutes than anyone in NBA history. So if those two guys like are a little tired, a little gassed, or a little overworked, like that's reasonable. The other guys do need to pick up the slack, but I also think those, with the exception of Rui, like Austin and D'Lo aren't going to swing a game with their like physicality, right? That's just not their strength. They're more skilled guys. So I think that's where the bench, like JJ's talked about the bench being banshees. And I do think that they played better tonight overall, but I wouldn't say that they've been as impactful as the Lakers have needed them to be. So that's where, like, I actually think Jackson had a good game tonight. 6 rebounds, 3 offensive. Jackson was active. So I want to make sure Jackson gets his credit. He did. He had a couple blocks as well. Now he did get attacked a bit, and guys just go right at Jackson and often score at him or get fouled. But overall, I thought Jackson made an impact. But with like Max, Gabe, and Dalton, I think those guys could be a little bit more impactful with their energy and their intensity. But it's like that. It's kind of a thing. Like I did a season preview podcast with Nate Duncan, and he asked me how many guys on this Lakers team like actually play hard, and it varies night to night, but it's not like this is a group that plays like very, very hard every night, right? Like they don't have a lot of high intense players. That's just like not the makeup of this team. So I think they're often at a disadvantage of that. And when a team is younger and more energetic and comes, again, kind of creating a track meet, that's where LA, sometimes like they got ran off the floor in Cleveland and they got ran off the floor tonight in the second half. And JJ kind of talked about it post game of like when teams are persistent and play really hard and just keep playing and playing and playing, the Lakers can struggle a bit as they did the last couple games. So that's something that I think they can work on it, but it's also partly the makeup of the team. And if they want to address that, they probably have to make a trade or two and probably adjust multiple rotation guys. I wouldn't even just say like one or two necessarily. The one or two could go a long way and help. JJ Chua, sir, do you think the Lakers' defensive rating is concerning? Yes, I'm going to look it up quickly right now as we are talking. So right now, let's see if they updated it with yes. So the Lakers are 27th in defensive rating, which is awful. The three teams below them are Atlanta, who's 2-4, Charlotte, who's 2-3, and the Raptors, who are 1-5. Offensively, the Lakers are 6th, but they have currently a -1 net rating overall. So they're actually, despite being 4-2, they're 15th in the NBA in net rating. So yeah, the defense is a problem, and that's what I like. It's been a major problem. It's probably been. I was saying I think the goal for them should be to be about league average, and if they could somehow sneak above league average, that's like a win. But they're probably going to be somewhere in like the 15 to 20 range, and then if they'll be a top 5 offense, and if they can be like they'll be a top 10 offense if they could be top 5, even top 3. That will make up for the poor defense. But 27th is like in small sample size, 6 games, and they've had a tough slate, right? Like 5 of the 6 teams have been pretty good that they played, but 27th is awful. It's really bad. Andrew F. Offense is ranked 6th. Throne of Lies. Are you going to admit you are wrong about AR-DLo? So I've been seeing you comment about AR-DLo, and I know the AR-DLo stands get mad at me whenever I criticize him. But let's pull it up. So right now, if you want, AR-DLo is 5th on the team in scoring. He's shooting 40% and 29% on threes. Austin is averaging 5 more points than him, shooting 8% better and 8% better on threes. Rui's averaging 2.5 more points than him, shooting 2.5% better and 23% better on threes. So I'm not sure what part I was wrong about with AR-DLo. He's been the 5th option. Rui and Austin have been outplaying him. He's not shooting well, and I'm not. I mean, please point out where I'm wrong with my analysis. Question from Drew. Important question. How is press dining in Toronto? So press dining in Toronto, we actually get a voucher. So we pay $15 and then we get a $25 voucher for the concourse. And then we go out in the concourse and spend that $25. Get anything under 25 or less. So I ended up getting a burger and fries. It was actually my breakfast today because I've been going through it, man. The last few weeks I've not been feeling well, and woke up today with a really bad headache and was just chilling, prepping for the mailbag that I did, then recorded the mailbag, edited it, then had to get ready for the game, went to the game. So it was actually like my breakfast at like 6:00, and but it was good. It was good. I got a Tim Hortons coffee also. I really like Tim Hortons, and one in Toronto, one in Canada. I'm seeing a lot of questions, the same question about the defensive rating. So defensive rating is 27th, and yes, it is concerning. Ron's key. Does the Lakers are Lakers going to make a move early, or they'll wait for the trade deadline? My understanding is they're going to wait until at least January, and then if they do make a move, I think they're going to assess the roster at that point, and depending on how well they're playing and who's available, who's healthy, who's overperforming, underperforming, and then go from there. Kane Carter, why do players who can't shoot like Steph, why do players who can't shoot look like Steph in gyms? This is an interesting thing. So, random memory for me, but when I was in playing basketball growing up, we there was a summer camp by our high school varsity coach, and his son was playing like D3 basketball, and he came one day to camp to kind of run us through drills, and he started shooting and like was kind of just showing off with his shooting, and he made like legitimately like 50 shots in a row. And yes, it was a high school court, so 3-point line is a little bit shorter, but just jumper after jumper, legitimately like 50 shots in a row. And I was like amazed because I had never seen like NBA players warm up, and I didn't know like the scale of the shooting. And I was just like, I guess you get to a certain level where you're a good shooter and you don't miss shots, but like that's just kind of how it is. Like even with centers, they shoot really well in practice, and then it's kind of like a mental mechanic thing where, you know, whether it's shooting or performing in front of 20,000 fans or the speed of the game, you start to lose your legs a bit, you start to lose your breath a bit. You get a bad pass, and now you're not shooting in motion. Your hands aren't on the right spot on the seams or whatever it is. Like there are a lot of factors that go into shooting the ball well. So a lot of guys will like, I'll see it like LeBron. I mean, if you look at LeBron, he's like a 90% free throw shooter in practice, and then he gets into the games and he's like low to mid 70s. So everyone's got like their kind of thing of shooting better in practice or you know, whatever it is. But yeah, it is pretty great. Like the point I was trying to make is like watching a D3 shooter shoot, he was making everything, and just now scale that up to like an NBA player. Like those guys, even the centers who like a DeAndre Jordan can shoot and make a lot of threes. It's just they can't do that in a game for a number of reasons. Okay, JJ Chua is spamming the chat with the defensive rating question. Dark Galaxy, do you have AD as the front runner for MVP and DPOY? MVP. So I probably and please don't kill me. I probably have Jason Tatum right now as MVP. Boston's what, 4-1, 5-1. Do they have the best net rating? I'm gonna pull that up in 1 second. Boston's playing at a really high level, and Jason Tatum has been really, really good. I don't know if that's going to sustain, but I would have AD in the top 3. I think based on LA's statistical profile in terms of like them as a team, them having a negative net rating is not good for. So Golden State actually leads the league. Boston's 4th. Shea's probably in the mix. Tatum's in the mix. Luka. I'd have to really go through it. I think right now I'd have Tatum, but AD's up there. Defensively, you as tough as this is, and this was kind of the point that JJ made when talking about AD and Defensive Player of the Year. Like he was basically like, because of the defensive rating, I ruled him out. And I think there are exceptions, and I think AD is probably an exception, but LA being in 27th in defense, I don't, like, no one's ever won Defensive Player of the Year with that bad of a defense. So that's not on AD. I'm not putting that on AD. I'm putting that on basically everybody else, but it's just tough. It's partly a team award to some extent. Lego Tortoise Builder, what do you think of this trade? Gabe, Max, Hayes, Jalen Hood, Maxwell for Bruce Brown and Kessler. I'd have to actually see if this works financially, but yeah, I would do that, and I think that would help the Lakers. Controversial Man, what's up, big baby? I see you. Controversial Man, thank you for the super chat. Did you feel AD was inconsistent 21 to 23, far cry from 2020? I wouldn't say inconsistent. I think inconsistent's a little harsh. I would say like mildly inconsistent because I feel like people, and I've heard LFR talks about this, and this is kind of a popular talking point with a lot of Lakers podcasts and Lakers analysts, but it's like AD is like one of the only players in the league who gets held to his ceiling all the time. And it's like people will act like an 18-9 game is like a horrible game from AD when that's better than 95% of the league. So, and if you look at his, like, if we pull up AD's averages right now, right? Like, so let's look at the championship season and then the last few years. I'm just going to I'll do points, rebounds, and field goal percentage. So let's just keep it simple. So title year, 26 points, 9 rebounds, 50% shooting from the floor. That next year, injury riddled, had multiple games he left early, so that affected his averages, but basically 22 a game, 8 rebounds, 49% shooting. So went down in all 3 categories. That was, I would say, his worst year as a Laker was probably that second year after the title. He's talked about like he came into camp out of shape. He didn't have much of an off season. It was like an 8-week off season. He took basically the entire time off, played his way into shape to start the season, got injured, but that's definitely his worst year as a Laker. Next year, 23, 10, and 53% shooting. So getting back close to that 2020. 2023, and I think especially at the end of this season was when AD, I feel like, started playing at this current level that carried into the conference finals, and then that carried into last season, and then now into this season. But 26, 12.5, and 56% shooting. So across the board, right there in terms of scoring with 2020, over 3 more rebounds than 2020, and over 6% better from the field. Next season, 25, 12.5 again, basically 56 again, basically the same season. And then this season, he's averaging almost 32 points a game, over 12 rebounds a game, and shooting over, right around 56 again. So he's basically had the same year 3 years in a row now in terms of mid-20s, 12 rebounds, mid-50s, like 55, 56% shooting. So I actually think AD's been very consistent. Like, are some games, is it sometimes he has the 35 and 15 and sometimes he has the like 18 and 8? Yeah. But I think that kind of went away last year. I feel like he was pretty dominant and consistent, like from start to finish. And I also think part of that was an offense problem where the Lakers would just go away from him. And we've seen with JJ, when you are intentional with making AD the focal point, good results happen, but also AD is going to be involved and he's going to get to the free throw line. He's going to score a lot. And he's going to put up the numbers that he's putting up. So I think that first year he was relatively inconsistent and again, was out of shape, dealt with injuries. But I would say overall, like AD's pretty consistent. And like, is he every night 30 and 12? No. Every night 25 and 12? No. But like, which star is? Like Giannis, Luka, Jokic? Like, is he at maybe that level? Probably not. But he's right there, and like whatever's that next tier. And plenty of those guys, if you go through their box scores, have poor nights, inconsistent games. So I just feel like for whatever reason, people hold AD to like just this crazy high standard, which I don't really think is fair. Ricky Burt, thank you for the super chat. We need a healthy Vando. Yes, Vando he doesn't solve everything because again, I think there's the offensive element that the Lakers are gonna have to figure out, but he solves a lot. Okay, I'm gonna go Guillermo Barzana. So I know you're a D'Lo guy, and D'Lo is a better playmaker than Austin. Yeah, D'Lo is a better passer. I'm not gonna deny that. Okay. Greg King, why are the Lakers staying in Toronto for 4 days? So Lakers had a weird schedule here where they played Wednesday in Cleveland, flew Wednesday night to Toronto Thursday, off day, game day today. Then they have 2 days off, and then they play Detroit Monday night. So basically, this will often happen with teams is sometimes on a road trip, you have like a couple days off and you get to pick which city you want to be in. And if you ask any NBA player, Toronto is often in their top 5 road cities. Detroit is not, with all respect to anyone from Detroit or Michigan in this chat or listening. So basically the Lakers players picked, we want to stay in Toronto. So they're staying in Toronto tomorrow. It's an off day. Then they're practicing Sunday, then flying in, getting in late afternoon to Detroit, and then spending the night in Detroit, Monday in Detroit, and then flying after the game to Memphis. Then Tuesday, Memphis, Tuesday, Memphis, probably off day, maybe practice. Wednesday, game, then leave Wednesday night back to LA. So that's the schedule for the next 5 days for the Lakers. I'm seeing we need someone like Dante off the bench. I've seen that multiple times. Yes. Kurt Affair, Jovan, what do you think of all the drama in Milwaukee? Do you see Giannis forcing his way out? It seems to be headed that way. The Giannis Dame pairing has just not worked out the way that any of us thought. I thought, like many, that it was going to be a really good duo. It was going to be a really good 2-man game. They've just not been able to figure it out. I think you throw in Doc Rivers, and he has had, let's say, some drama with his teams or some underperformance, especially I think more recently, like as there's been more distance from Boston and even the Clippers. So I think those are all, parts of it, but I think they'll ultimately be fine in the sense of like, they'll probably figure out a way to right the ship and be like a high 40s or maybe even approach 50 wins because of how bad the bottom of the East is, the bottom of the league. But is Giannis going to force his way out? I mean, if they don't fix it, I would not be surprised if he asks out in January or like, closer to the deadline. Okay, I'm done with the AR-DLo. I'm done with it. Controversial man. How were you in high school / in 07? How do you react to Kobe trade rumors? Was he perceived different at the time? Thoughts on Kobe fans who stopped rooting because of Bron? A lot of questions there. In high school, I was an enforcer. I would get lots of, I would say I was a low usage. I was more like a floor spacer. So I played center. Again, I'm 6'5", 6'6", whatever. And I played center because my high school, there's not a lot of height. And I was more of like a shot blocker, post defense, a little bit of switchability. Not I could switch on to maybe some wings, but not guards. And I was an enforcer. So like I'd get flagrants, I'd get technicals. I would often try and get in the head of like whoever was the best player on the opposing team. That was sort of my role. So I had a weird varsity season just because I would start some games, I'd come off the bench some games. My coach was like a previous Lakers coach where I just didn't know my role night to night, and it was not based on my performance either. It was like sometimes I wouldn't be playing well and I'd be starting, and sometimes I would be playing well, but then I'd get bent. It just didn't really make sense, but that's my kind of high school experience. And then Kobe trade rumors. I mean, I didn't want him to be traded, and I was glad the Lakers kept him, but I also understood at that point that he was frustrated, and it had been a couple down years, and the Shaq trade didn't really age well, even though it ultimately led to the Lakers getting Powell. But during that stretch, it was like, felt like they kind of sold low on Shaq, and he goes and wins the title in Miami, and Kobe's pissed, and like, I understood why he wanted out. I'm not going to tell Kobe fans who to root for or what to do. Like, I think if you're a Kobe fan, be a Kobe fan. If you're a Laker fan, be a Laker fan, right? So if you only cared about Kobe, or you grew to only care about Kobe and you don't mess with Bron or the Lakers or Bron fans, whatever, then that's your choice. But obviously, I think if you're a Laker fan, like, I think at this point, I mean, LeBron has embraced the Lakers, right? Like, this is now going to be the second longest stint of his career. And it actually might end up being the longest he's been with one team consecutively, because he was in Cleveland for 7 years, goes to Miami for 4, back to Cleveland for 4. Now he's going on year, 7 in LA. So if he plays another year, that's year 8. He's played in LA longer than any other stretch. So like LeBron has embraced the Lakers. He brought them a title. I know that, Westbrook trade and people want to hold different stuff against him, but I think LeBron has embraced being a Laker. I think he's been a good ambassador for the Lakers. He helped them win a title. And I get it if it was like 2018, 2019. But the second they won the title in 2020, I think if you're a true Laker fan, you would support LeBron. But that's my opinion. Again, you all can do whatever you want, and I support it. Okay. Okay, this is gonna be the last one. Catalyst, I see your Luka question. I think there's something there, but I'm not sure. I think things would have to go wrong in Dallas for that to really come through. But I think if they do go wrong, I think the Lakers would be in the mix for Luka. Henry Kellen, last question here. Hi, Jovan. Do you think Vando will replace Gabe in the 9-man rotation? I will point you to my mailbag, and I get deeper into it. However, I think as of right now, my read on the situation would be Vando entering the rotation and it becoming more of a 10-man rotation. I actually think if he's going to face someone out, it's probably Max, because if you look at the other 3 guys, Vando is most similar with Max in terms of like skill set. Obviously, they're different players overall, but like he cannot do what Dalton does offensively. Gabe is 6'1" and plays a certain role. So I like there's not much overlap between those two. And then Jackson is the backup 5, which maybe Vando could play some backup 5, I guess, if you really need him to, but he's much more of a wing. And the other defensive-minded wing that he's in competition with is Max Christie. So I think if he's taking anyone's minutes, it's probably Max. But I think it's more so going to be a little less Max, a little less Gabe, a little less Jackson, maybe a little less Dalton if he doesn't get going offensively, and then a little less Rui, a little less AD, a little less LeBron. And like that, if you shave off like 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes from all those players, you get somewhere in that like 16 to 20 minute range. And that's ultimately where I think Vando is going to be. I do think JJ is going to continue with this starting lineup for now and playing all the starters 30 plus minutes. And it's still going to be just like whoever's leading the bench isn't playing more than like 20, 22 minutes. I just don't currently see that role available unless they cut Max or Dalton or Gabe out of the rotation. And clearly, I mean, again, Gabe's closed 4 or 5 games, so I don't see it being Gabe. They're high on Dalton, especially his offensive skill set and versatility and shooting. I don't see it being Dalton. It's going to be a battle between Jackson and Christian for the backup 5. So it really comes down to Max versus Vando. And I think because of the investment in Max and their confidence in him long term, they're going to just try and make it work with both. But if I had to pick someone to be slashed, Max already played the fewest minutes tonight outside of Bronny, which I'm not going to count. So I think it would be Max, but I think they're going to try and make it work with like 9.5, 10. But if he really wants to keep it to 9, I think Max is the guy who gets cut out. A-dub. I just imagine kids getting hard fouled and hearing Buha, Buha. Yeah, man. It's I was a little yeah. I was a knucklehead, I'll say. It's so weird because if you meet me or know me, like I have such a low key, laid back personality, but on the court, the Serbian and my mom would say the Puerto Rican side also came out. Like I had a temper. Okay. Barth Ram, can we get a film session on the plays that Lakers regularly go to? Maybe a breakdown with Sam Vecini, also their defensive schemes depending on the matchup. That'd be really informative. Yes, I'm planning on doing more film work, so I will work on that. Ryan Rich, what do you think about Scotty Jr. firing shots at Darvin Ham? That was the most random shot. That was also the most direct shot at Darvin. I want to stop talking about Darvin just because I feel bad that like I've said my piece on it. I've reported my piece on it, and I kind of want to put that to bed. But clearly, his players were not fans of him, and that doesn't mean he's at fault necessarily. But I obviously think there were some things he clearly did wrong and could have done better. But to get it from Scottie Pippen Jr., that's that was surprising. But yeah. So what's funny, New Age Live, I have been compared to Zach Collins in terms of my looks. I've been compared to every basically every white player in the league. Austin Reeves, Myers Leonard, Dalton Connect. There's more, but like basically any white guy with sort of like hair similar to mine at all is I've been compared to. So that's funny. But yeah, I've gotten Zach Collins a lot. I'd say more of a Kelly Olynyk, between Kelly Olynyk and Tyler Hansbrough. Okay. That's it. I'm going to call it a night. It's almost 2 a.m. here in Toronto, but I appreciate you. As Ray just said, we'll wrap with this. This is my longest show. I think it's my longest show. Maybe I did one that was a little over an hour and a half recently. I think it might have been my one in Cleveland, went pretty long, but it's don't compare me to Tyler Hansbrough. Come on, guys. Okay, the chat's killing me, but I appreciate you all for rocking with me tonight for late night gang. I know it's 10:47 in LA, 1:47 here in Toronto. But that will do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. As always, if I didn't get to a question, I apologize, but you can also ask me either in the mailbag prompts or under the show, and I will do my best to answer your question and respond. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment under this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Monday with a post-game reaction after Lakers-Pistons. We'll see if the Lakers can use that as a get-right game. I will talk to you then.